and welcome to the Draft Capital podcast. It's the first Draft Capital episode of 2024. I'm Stuart Brooke, and my co-host is Mo Murphy, and we are back for the 2024 draft season. And Mo, let me tell you this, man, we are getting ready and getting set for what is shaping up to be a just a draft class full of maybe surprises. The fact that we may see four quarterbacks go in the top four and JJ McCarthy might be one of them is very shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Trust and believe. I think the same thing. But I get it. I get it. He's a prototypical quarterback build. He's slender. You probably would like him to be a little bit heavier, but he's quick on his feet. He got some wheels. So I get it. And this happens every year. And then, hey, he did the infamous, back foot throw, 65 yards. Like, hey, that got Zach Wilson number two. I think just the difference with JJ McCarthy is maybe he is what everybody thought Zach Wilson would be. But the difference is JJ McCarthy has played at the highest level in college football and won a national championship. So now you kind of a little more justified at how everybody looked at Zach Wilson with the unlocked potential. But there's like playing meaningful football and winning football with JJ McCarthy. And I think that's what's making people fall in love because he is a guy who he would be one I predicted would look good in shorts and a t-shirt, slinging the ball, showing his untapped potential. All those guys, the Spencer Rattlers that we'll talk about here in a little bit, all those guys with that like untapped potential, like man, they all look good in shirt and shorts. And then, when you win a lot of college football games, people will find the last minute way to fall in love with you, especially when they start moving quarterbacks and moving on from quarterbacks and certain quarterbacks aren't available anymore. So I think that's what the hype with JJ McCarthy. But at the end of the day, dude wins, man. Like at the end of the day, if you draft a GM, you drafted a winning quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but we've both had our opinions on kind of where JJ sits. We did on my podcast earlier, we did a episode on what we on my quarterback rankings, and we both kind of talked about what we thought about JJ McCarthy, and it definitely wasn't that he was a top four quarterback in the draft. But today's episode is about QB hit and misses. We're going to talk about some of that. We're going to talk about Spencer Rattler. We're going to touch on my running back rankings from last week as well. Kind of just some different points and not go over all eight. But I did release, and this is where we'll start, my top 8 corners in this year's draft. And I'm going to share the screen here so people can see what we're looking at for my top 8. So if you look on the top 8 here, as you can see, number 1, I have Quinyon Mitchell. I have Nate Wiggins at 2. I have Terrion Arnold at 3. Kool-Aid McKinstry at 4. My favorite corner in all of this draft is TJ Tampa. We have Cooper DeJean at 6. At 7, DJ James. And at 8, we have Max Melton. So first thoughts there when you see that top 8, Mo.
Cooper DeJean kind of low, man.
I think he's going to be a safety though, so that's where I kind
do.
of think he makes that transition.
I think it's possible, but I mean, we kind of heard that coming out ever since. We kind of heard that at the end of the college football season. Ever since we haven't heard much. He's coming off of that foot surgery, so I'm not sure what he'll be. I'm not sure how NFL GMs. I guess we'll see once he gets drafted because he's going to be a guy. The team and who the defensive coordinator of that team is tells me probably what their plans with him are. I think this corner class is a little weak. The corner class is a little weak. I mean, basically, you and the rest of the world then fell in love with a corner from Toledo. I'm not saying he won't be great. He could be, but he has all the intangibles. He has all the workout numbers for you to fall in love with him. He has a little bit of Sauce Gardner to his game. If I know you watched his film, so he reminds me a little bit of Sauce Gardner.
Yeah.
And Sauce Gardner is one of the 3 best corners in the league right now, coming from a Cincinnati. So I'm not going to knock a guy coming from Toledo. It's just he kind of hit the scene quick. after he ran that 40 time and kind of jumped up a lot of people's boards as far as top corners. You started hearing his name a lot. Now he's probably going to go in the first round. I don't trust Clemson corners like that. But I get it though, because it seems like when they get to the league, they take a little time to develop, but they do be good. To have Nate Wiggins at number 2, it would be like kind of when people look at Ohio State quarterbacks, like the past success of some of the corners that you've had and how long it takes would make me knock them a little bit, especially when you're talking about at 3 and 4, you got 2 Alabama corners. Like, and we know what they do in the league. TJ Tampa's an interesting one. And I'm going to be honest, the reason why he's interesting to me, him and Cooper DeJean, I have the same knock on them, is you never really got to see him match up one-on-one with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I did get to see Max Melton do that. But that's not their fault. You know, they don't control the schedule. They don't control any of that. So it's not their problem. But TJ Tampa, I think he's the sleeper that could end up like, if you want to go one way, I go him or Quinyon Mitchell end up being the best corners in this draft. So
yeah, when it comes to like corners, I'm kind of this way with linebackers too. I like kind of the linebackers that can cover. Nakobe Dean was my top linebacker the year he came out. Isaiah Simmons was the year he came out. For corners, I kind of like the taller guys, like the Richard Shermans of the world, those types of corners. That's where Nate Wiggins, like he's not as bulky, but he is. I think he's like 6'2" or 6'1" or
you like
something.
your corner 6'2" and up.
Yes. But where TJ Tampa gets me is I like the thumpers too. Like I like the guys who will come in and lay some wood. And when you watch the tape of TJ Tampa, he's going to come in, he's going to knock your lights out. So he's not the type of corner that's, oh, I'm just a coverage guy. Like he's a guy where if the running back catches the ball in the flats and he comes down full head of steam, it might be, you might have Gus Johnson asking where the barbecue's at again, because it's one of those things where he's going to come down like Denzel Ward did and just lay you out. And that's what I really like about a guy like TJ Tampa. That's why I say he's my favorite, because I think that part of his game does translate to the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's a lot like what's his name from Illinois last year?
Um,
With
Witherspoon. Yeah.
Devin Witherspoon. I think he's a lot like that. Mightily funny that they're coming out of the Big Ten. That's kind of how Big Ten corners are built outside of like at Ohio State, where they get the flashy, first round, big, elite kind of talents at corners where you see the difference. But a lot of the Big Ten corners is Cooper DeJean, TJ Tampa, Witherspoon from last year. Like that's kind of your typical corner coming out of the Big Ten. So I do think he'll be successful, and he's going to be, the farther you get down this list, but understand how talented these guys are, the more you kind of see like that's where these guys end up being the best players in the draft, because they end up going to the right system. Like they end up going to a team who they drafted TJ Tampa because he was the best player available, not because they needed him. And so at that point, you're like, okay, I'm adding to the depth at the corner position. Maybe I start off in the slot my rookie year and move my way to being an outside corner, maybe an injury, speeds up that process, a la DaRon Bland in Dallas. Like the injuries speed up the fact of him moving from like being a slot corner to outside corner. So I can see TJ Tampa kind of being like that, excuse me, and going to a defense that's already ready made for his skill set to kind of just fit right in, adapt, and have a really good rookie year.
Yeah, and then for Quinyon Mitchell, I think this is a guy who has shown abilities within his game to be, like you said, the Sauce Gardner lockdown corner type. We'll see if it translates to the NFL or not. This is the corner position is definitely one I'm watching and keeping an eye on, because I feel like as a Colts fan, it's the biggest need they need. But for me, Quinyon, he has those abilities. And I think, he's quick with the hip turn. He's quick with, play reaction. I think he's very good at playing man to man, and he's very good at zone. Some of these guys are kind of not one trick ponies, but struggle in other areas of the game where I think he's good in both assets. And so that's why I had him as the number 1 corner in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at it. He's kind of climbed up everybody's board. He's a consistent top 3 corner heading into this draft cycle. So I'm gonna be interested at do teams really buy into the hype once they head into the draft? Because come draft night, everybody's boards look one way, but teams say different on how they evaluate some of these guys. So I'll be interested to see if he makes it in the first round. I would assume he probably does, but I'm interested to see.
And I will agree, this is not, in my opinion, this is not the year where you see 4 or 5 corners drafted like we have in the last few years. I think this is a year where you see maybe 2 drafted and those types of things, because this is, and some are going to get popped up the draft board. I mean, the Raiders with John Gruden took a corner out of Ohio State that nobody had heard of except Ohio State fans, and wasn't expected to be a first round pick, and then wound up being a first round pick and didn't pan out. So no offense, didn't mean it like that. I just
Yeah,
meant,
because that was disrespectful, because yes, he was worthy. Everybody knew who he was. He just got overdrafted. That's all it was. Everybody thought he was getting drafted in the second round. Like he was
yeah,
a late first, second round guy. And so he went what, top 10?
yeah,
Top
maybe top
top
15.
15, but he was like the first or second corner off the board. And there were a whole bunch of other corners, because even I was like, what the hell are they doing? Like, I'm like, he's not supposed to go. And it wasn't, he's good. Like, he's a really good. I was just like, his name wasn't supposed to be called yet. Like, it was maybe at the end of tonight, or wake up tomorrow and watch the draft tomorrow. That's where they messed up. They just overdrafted a guy. And then, yeah, his career. Yeah, we know where he went from there.
So we'll transition. Speaking of bust, we'll transition to the quarterback position now. Bucky Brooks put out a tweet not too long ago talking about the recent history of hit and miss rates with the NFL quarterbacks. And, here's the thing. I got my start, or I started doing this at least publicly, or publishing rankings in 2018. And I remember thinking 2018 was the best draft class at that point that we had since 2004, because everybody thought Sam Darnold was going to be that guy. Everybody thought Josh Rosen was that guy. Then you had some of the wild cards in Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. And 3 out of the 5 that drafted in the first round have been to the playoffs, those types of things. But you kind of look ahead, that class didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. We know what 2019 was. 2020, I think that was the Joe Burrow class. So you had Burrow and Tua showed flashes. There's people who put him in his top 4, but we don't know. And then you look at the Trevor Lawrence draft class, and I think that's where this starts to go downhill, because outside of Trevor, and even Trevor at times, there's been questions about what he can and can't do. He hasn't been the best quarterback since Andrew Luck, and a lot of times, like, he was deemed when he came out. And then you look at last year's kind of draft class early on, anyways, it looks like maybe it's going to be a fight between CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson if he can stay healthy, and maybe Will Levis. But Bryce Young doesn't look that great, at least year one. But you look at some of the others, it just, like, 19 quarterbacks have drafted in the first round or something like that. And the only two 19 quarterbacks in the last 2 drafts, and the only ones that panned out were Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant. So this
First
is
pick of the
crazy to
draft and
me.
last pick of the draft.
Yeah.
I don't find it that crazy. For the simple fact, it goes based off of the fact, all right, the better quarterback you are in college, the worse the team you go to in the NFL. If a team's picking top 5, more than likely, I'll say 3 of those 5 teams, their biggest need is quarterback. So we are asking whoever we draft, you're expected from day one, first round pick, top 5 pick, to be the franchise savior. You are our biggest need. We suck because we don't have a quarterback. That doesn't mean you're our only need. And that doesn't mean because quarterback is our biggest need that right behind quarterback, we don't need 3 more offensive linemen or 2 more wide receivers or a whole new secondary. So these elite quarterbacks go to the worst situations, ran by GMs that are going to be fired, coaches that are going to be fired, owners that are going to be pissed off, and go through. Some of these guys play for 3 head coaches before they finally get it right and get a career rolling. So I think the hit it's a mixture of overvaluing the quarterback position when it comes to drafting, as well as not being able to develop a quarterback organizationally and fully committing to a guy that you drafted, putting everything that he needs. And so it's all aspects. You overvalue the quarterback position, so you take 4 guys in the top 5. I don't think of the top 5 picks, though, I don't think the 4 quarterbacks that could go in the top 5 are the 4 best players in this draft. And so you don't necessarily draft based on who's the best available at what you pick at number 2, or the number 3 pick doesn't mean you're getting the 3rd best player in the draft. You might just be getting the 3rd best quarterback because 2 quarterbacks are already taken. So I think we overvalue how we draft quarterbacks, and then a mixture of they go to bad organizations. They're where they are typically for a reason. A lot of times it's the same teams that repeat the cycle every couple of years, being a top 3 to 5 draft pick. So I think it's more so just the better you are in college, bro, the worse team you go to in the NFL. And sometimes you just can't get out of that hole, because at the end of the day, these are all professionals, and your window is not very short in the NFL if you don't have success. People lose their jobs.
Yeah, and I also think too, like, I'm not going to give the quarterbacks a lot of the blame here. Some of them, it's coaching, and I say that in the sense of, I'll use Kenny Pickett for example. You know, with Kenny Pickett, we had this conversation then, Mo, about his arm and how strong it wasn't and those types of things. And there was a reason that I remember after the Senior Bowl, I was watching them in a hotel room because it had snowed and work paid for us, so we didn't have to go home. And I remember watching it and saying, hey, like, his arm will not work in you know, rainy weather, windy weather, those types of things. It's just very weak. And yet you watch the game plan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and how they wanted to play, and it doesn't necessarily go into the way that he does. With a guy like Kenny, a lot of times you got to do maybe some quick passes, screens, those types of things. And I know people are like, well, it doesn't. Alex Smith made a 15-year career out of doing that stuff. So, I mean, you can figure it out. There's ways to do it. With Justin Fields, I don't think he was used right a lot of the times. And you look at those situations with a guy like, we look at a guy like Trey Lance. Lance never really got the opportunity after he got hurt. Brock Purdy stepped in, took it over, but he's a guy who's raw, and you got to take the same game plan with him that Buffalo took with Josh Allen, the Colts are taking with Anthony Richardson, which is you got to ease him into being the guy that you want him to be. And if you just throw him out there and expect him to succeed, then it doesn't always work. And I understand timelines are different, but it's your job as the coach to develop the guy. And if you can't do it, it's not all the quarterback's fault. Sometimes it's on you, especially when you know their weaknesses and their strengths. You should coach to their strengths and not to their weaknesses.
Yeah, but think about it. Now you're asking a coach to put all that focus on a quarterback, right? But you just watched a team like with Brock Purdy at quarterback go to the Super Bowl, like, because they had it made everywhere else. And like, coaches know when you draft a quarterback, man, you got 2, maybe 3 years before you possibly lose your job. Like, Eberflus at Chicago right now is bringing in a rookie quarterback, probably with his job on the line. Like, you're drafting Caleb Williams, and basically y'all won 7 games last year. Like, the expectation kind of is 9, 10 wins for Chicago, especially all the moves they made in the offseason. So the timeline of Caleb Williams and his development doesn't match the timeline of a head coach and his job security. And so his focus got to be, at the end of the day, a head coach's focus is to win football games by any means. If that means we got the number 1 defense and the worst offense, I allowed the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. Couldn't score jack, but they had one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they ended up going to the playoffs. And so Mike Tomlin, at the end of the day, even with this, in spite of Kenny Pickett being trash, basically, Mike Tomlin was able to put 10 wins on the board, basically being elite everywhere else. And now he got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in the building. But I think, like, you're bringing Caleb Williams in, and you're putting these expectations, and you brought all the weapons. That's how you're supposed to treat as an organization. That's how you're supposed to be when you know you're bringing in a rookie quarterback. You traded away Fields. All right, we know we're going quarterback. We assume we're going Caleb Williams. We assume they're going Caleb Williams. But we go get you Keenan Allen. We go get you DeAndre Swift. You already got DJ Moore on the on the roster. We still got Cole Kmet. We have the number 9 pick as well, so we still can get another offensive lineman. Our O-line developed over the year. So they're sitting in a good position, but at the end of the day, like, what if Caleb Williams just isn't Patrick Mahomes right away? And so they do lose a few games that they probably shouldn't lose. And maybe it's because Caleb Williams makes rookie mistakes. But now, like as a coach, we got to figure out how to turn around the season. I can't worry about the development of my rookie quarterback because I'm worried about my job. And so it would have made sense to, I'm sorry, it would have made sense if you was going to move on from Fields. It would have made sense to move on from Eberflus and reset the clock with a head coach, honestly. So I'm surprised the Bears didn't do that. And I almost think, man, like if you go, you're a top 5 team, top 5 pick, and you're drafting a quarterback, I really think you should probably have a first year head coach alongside it and let that coach and that GM. And I know you don't necessarily fire GMs for having top 5 picks. It could be their first year under their regime, but you let that coach ride with that quarterback for their window of 2 to 3 years before you start looking at a new head coach and new quarterback, and you let them be able to take the time and develop together and make your head coach and your rookie quarterback's timelines match. You got to have a matching because Caleb Williams could walk into his sophomore season, like he could walk into his second year in the NFL with a new head coach. This man could be on the second head coach in his second year in the NFL. Like it's very possible if he doesn't basically step on the field and become a star and get the Bears to 9 or 10 wins and borderline make the playoffs. Like now you're because of that expectation, even if you played really good, you're playing with a second coach on your second year. So that happens too. I think these GMs and these owners need to match these timelines. Like if you're going to draft Caleb Williams, you should buy Eberflus at least 2 years. Like he has his rookie year and his second year. Going into Caleb Williams' third year should be like, okay, if he's not developed or it's just not working, now we move on. But I think like Eberflus should be guaranteed when they draft Caleb Williams, you got 2 years. You got at least 2, unless it's just so egregious next year that you fire him in the middle of the season. But there needs to be a little bit of security so Eberflus can take the time this offseason once they draft Caleb Williams to fully develop him and make sure he's ready to lead this team even prior to entering training camp.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's talk about this because you went on your TikTok and made an interesting point, shall I say, which is you think Spencer Rattler will be the second best quarterback when it's all said and done in this draft class. And pre-show we were talking, you said you probably have him QB2 right now. Here's my thing with Spencer. I've just recently came around on Spencer Rattler. A big concern was, I think the biggest concern I have with him for me was the decision making that he had at Oklahoma, which is ultimately why he got benched and ultimately led to Caleb Williams and all that kind of stuff at Oklahoma. I think that kind of changed for him. I think he realized he doesn't have to live up to being the guy that was the top quarterback in the class coming out because he's already lost that spot. So just come in, your back's against the wall, just play good football. And I think he did down the stretch there at South Carolina. I think he showed some intangibles that will work. I'm still really high on a guy like Drake May. Like I think Drake May can do a lot of the same things that we're oohing and awing about with Caleb Williams. He's just fallen victim, as can Spencer Rattler. But I think we've fallen victim to the fact of we've seen him play 2 years, and the last year wasn't as great as the first year. So those types of things. But for me, ultimately, when I look at Spencer Rattler, I don't think you're too far off, and I honestly don't think it's that wild to say that when it's all said and done and we look back, Spencer Rattler could be the second best quarterback in this draft class, especially when your boy here was hyping up a certain quarterback out of Utah State and said the same thing, and everybody told me how great Justin Herbert was going to be and Tua Tagovailoa, and I said, yeah, but I think that guy from Utah State might wind up being the best out of those three. So I'm with you. I feel what it's like, and yeah. So I don't think you're too far off.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with Spencer Rattler is he's probably going to benefit from having every opportunity that I think Drake may not. Like, let's say Drake May goes third to the Patriots. Patriots got the third pick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say he goes 3 to the Patriots. Let's say Jerod Mayo's a bad head coach. Let's say he's gone in 2 years. Okay. Now I'm about to be on a whole new head coach, this, that, and the other. As opposed, and who's the starting quarterback? Mac Jones. So like that's who I'm walking in learning. Let's say Spencer Rattler, and I said a few teams Even while going on my little rant of my Spencer Rattler support. But let's just say let's say these 3 teams for this sake, just to not go down the long list of whatever. Let's say Atlanta, Dallas, Green Bay. New York, the Jets. So he gets to walk in, and I'm going to either back up Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, or Aaron Rodgers. Now, if you're Spencer Rattler, you go to a team like Dallas. Now, I know Trey Lance is there, so it doesn't necessarily make sense because this could be what they're grooming Trey Lance for. But just for the point of he's probably going to have an opportunity to be like Jordan Love and be behind a really good veteran quarterback for the next 1 to 3 years, depending on where he goes. He gets to get accustomed to the NFL lifestyle. He gets to get accustomed to what it takes to win. He gets accustomed to what it takes to be a professional quarterback, to carry. He gets to go through everything without the pressure of having to win games. And by the time he gets to go through and grow through that, now he will be ready. By the time he should be ready to be a starting quarterback for the NFL, he will be able to make fresh starts. And it'll kind of be like the Jordan Love situation. It might be a little bit up and down because you put he's been in the league for 3 years. He's not a rookie, but still, that live game action is a lot different than the development and practice and preseason and everything else over the next 3 years. But you saw towards the end of the season, Jordan Love started going on a tear. And we kind of have expectations now with Jordan Love going into next year. He won a playoff game, beat the hell out of the Dallas Cowboys. Like, we're not talking about a scrub. We're talking about a guy that in his first year as a starter wins a playoff game, could have won 2. His team could have been in the NFC Championship. So, like, going that Jordan Love route really seems like it pays off for a lot of teams, and Green Bay's done it every time. They went from Brett Favre, they got Aaron Rodgers maybe before they should have moved on, and it panned out. And they got Jordan Love maybe before they should have, but it's still, in a sense, when you look at the success of him as a starter this year, it panned out. So maybe like drafting a quarterback before you actually need one is probably the formula to make sure that you, at the very least, at worst case scenario, have steady quarterback play while you're constantly rebuilding and dealing with drafting and winning games and everything that you have to deal with as an organization. I think Spencer Rattler is going to get the opportunity to be able to do just that. And I think that's what every rookie quarterback should be able to walk into. But we know the better you are and the higher you are on somebody's radar, that's not the case. You're going to be a franchise savior, as opposed to just being able to learn the ins and outs of everything that it takes to be an NFL quarterback for your first 2 to 3 years and then step in as a starter. And because we don't question Spencer Rattler's talent, so you're telling me this dude is just as talented as damn near anybody else in this draft except Caleb Williams, and he's going to get the time to learn with no pressure, and he's not going to be evaluated on wins or losses because he's backing up a starting quarterback that's capable of putting enough wins and putting teams in the playoffs. He's going to get to learn from a guy like that. I think when you get to be that talented and walk into probably the best situation, I think Spencer Rattler ends up having the second best career. And that's because, just for argument's sake, I'm going to give the fact that, hey, if Caleb Williams is a generational prospect, he's going to have generational success. He's going to be the Bears quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. And if you tell me that's what the number 1 pick is, then he's going to probably be the most successful. And so I'm going to say Spencer Rattler probably going to be more successful than anybody else, because he's not going to carry the burden that J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, and some of these guys are going to carry being drafted top 5 picks.
Here's the thing too, Mo, and I'm looking at this. When I first saw your TikTok earlier in the day, and you were talking about it, it got me thinking. And I was like, there's probably going to be 4 guys, maybe 5, go in the first round. We know for sure Daniels, May, and Williams are going to go in probably
McCarthy. So
and probably like McCarthy are all going to go in the top 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at maybe 13 to Denver. It could be Bo Nix. Maybe Bo Nix goes to Minnesota. It kind of just depends, right? But this reminds me, because this reminds me of a certain player, and not necessarily play style, but kind of where I think maybe they wind up getting drafted. And I'm going to bring this player up because I was not high on him when he came out at all. I had him as like my 6th or 7th quarterback, much like I do Spencer Rattler. I think he could have a very similar draft position as a Jalen Hurts. You look at that I think there could be a coach that falls in love with him and takes him in the 2nd round. to be honest with you. And a lot like you were saying with Hurts. Hurts sat behind Carson Wentz, who, looking back now, a lot of people are like, well, it's Carson. But Carson was coming off the MVP year, that type of stuff, or at least a year where he took him to the playoffs and then got hurt again. But you look at, Michael Penix is probably going to be a second-round pick. But outside of that, who else you got in the second round? So you look at it, there's a mixture of different types of guys. And Spencer, if a coach falls in love with him, very well could go in the second round. And we could be talking about, like you said, Spencer Rattler. We, on draft day or the second day of the draft, we may be like, that was a dumb pick. But in 10 years, we may be like, or even in 3 years, we might be like, it wasn't that dumb to take him in the second round.
If you're a team and you're the team that drafts Spencer Rattler in the second round, and you have a starting quarterback that can win you 10 games, then just trust the front office and what they see. If you have a quarterback that can win you 10 games and you draft Spencer Rattler, I promise you it's not a wasted draft pick. I promise you don't feel like it's a wasted draft pick. Just see the vision, because they're seeing we have a guy that can steadily win us. It could be the Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes situation. I'm not saying Rattler's Mahomes. All I'm saying is when they drafted Mahomes, and they drafted him in the first round, but they had Alex Smith, but they saw we got a guy that can win 10 games and get us to the playoffs. But we need more than that. And we think this guy might have some untapped potential. If we give him some time, he could take us to the next level. Obviously, we know what Mahomes did. But like, even with that thought process, if you feel like I got a guy that can win 10 games, and I think Spencer Rattler can win me 13 in 3 years, so I'm going to take him in the second round and go ahead and secure 3 years from now of my life, then just rock with what the front office is doing. I promise you, they're not taking Spencer Rattler for no reason. I swear to God. But he probably won't go second round. I think he probably falls to like the fourth. He probably goes like third or fourth round.
I completely agree, but I think if it could be very possible, because we know how it is. They fall in love with traits. He does do some Patrick Mahomes type stuff. He does do a lot of stuff that Caleb Williams does that a lot of people go nuts about. So I was saying that. I think Michael Penix is probably going to be the only one, maybe Bo Nix, that goes in the second round. Because I don't see much more than that going in the second round outside of, especially if we have 4 or 5 go in the first. So
yeah, I agree.
All right, let's go to the running backs, because I released my running back rankings a little bit last week, and I had Jalen Wright from Tennessee as the number 1 running back. And what I love about Jalen is, and I'm not saying that the other guys in this draft can't do this, but one of my big things that I look for with running backs is, can you bust a home run ball? Like, JT does. We've seen Derrick Henry do it. We've seen Joe Mixon do it. There's some running backs in college that are very productive in college, but they can't get away from a running back at linebacker at Vanderbilt. How are you going to get away from a linebacker in the NFL that runs a 4.340? So there's things like that where, like, I have concerns, but not with any of the top 4 or 5 guys in this draft. But with Jalen Wright, he hits that home run ball pretty consistently. He doesn't rush for many negative yards. Like, there's not many yards where you say that should have been picked up. That was left on the field there. He gets everything that he's supposed to get and then some. And I think he's a very good pass catcher out of the backfield and can do a lot of great things, and what you need to do with a running back these days. Now, Blake Corum does some of the same stuff, as does Jonathan Brooks. So, I can see where the argument comes. Like I said, when I released my running back rankings, there is no, in my opinion, clear cut running back 1 like we had last year with Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, there's definitely not, especially because just by the year we're devaluing the running back position, year by year, especially in the draft. Probably none of these guys get drafted in the first round. I doubt. If so, I guess it would be a reach. We're probably at the point we saw one running back last year in the first round. We're probably
2.
At the point where it was 2.
Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson.
Gibbs. Yeah. Yeah, I'll probably say none of these guys go in the first round. And so for that, I still think it's Trey Benson. It's probably my running back 1. Jonathan Brooks coming off the ACL is like very concerning, but I think he goes to a team like Dallas. Him or Blake Corum end up in Dallas. And hey, the Dallas, I'm just saying, the Cowboys team.
Do you guys have a running back right now?
Yeah, whoever we draft out of Blake Corum and Jonathan Brooks, that'll be our running back and Deuce Vaughn. So anyway, I like Trey Benson. I've always liked Blake Corum though. I think not this past season, but last year I felt like Blake Corum was the best running back in the country.
And you said that.
That was including Bijan Robinson. I felt like he was better. Now, evaluating what you think they're going to be in the NFL and as opposed to just who's the king of college football at running back is two different things. And so I understand that and I know how to separate that. So me saying Blake Corum was better than Bijan Robinson last year is not me saying that Blake Corum is going to be a better pro. And if Bijan Robinson could be a top 10 pick, so could Blake Corum. It's not what I'm saying. I know how to separate evaluating what a guy's going to do in the NFL and just appreciating how great these guys can be in college. And so I think Blake Corum, because he was coming off the injury, I think he played really well this year, but they implemented Donovan Edwards a lot more. And so it impacted his stats a little bit, but at the same time, like it kept him healthy and coming off an injury, he didn't really get to where you overkill as far as carries, and they didn't want to beat up his body heading into the NFL. Jim Harbaugh knows this is an NFL running back, and so you try and protect him. You got a Donovan Edwards that you could split carries and stuff with, and we knew, once Corum was coming off the injury, you kind of saw that throughout most of the year. But I think Blake Corum, I think Benson, I think all the running backs are ready to be starting running backs right now. Which, I mean, you probably could say any running back in this draft could be a starting running back, but I think like the top 5 guys are ready-made to start. Like they could be a starting running back on a playoff team and be ready and have that team ready to go. And they probably upgraded at the running back position.
Yeah. And there's a certain couple guys I have my eyes on because, the Colts have Jonathan Taylor. Don't get me wrong. But as we saw last year, JT missed 4 games due to contract dispute. If he happens to get hurt, we need a running back that can step in. Zach Moss did that. Zach Moss is now in Cincinnati. I look at a guy like, Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. I look at some of the others down.
How about y'all just go ahead and be the Wisconsin Badgers in the backfield? Go ahead.
Or Bucky Irving, kind of do a 1-2 punch, different types of ways. I'm not huge on Bucky Irving, but I do think you need that backup guy. So for the Colts, that'd be great. But like you were talking about, I think it'd be very interesting with Dallas as to who they take because I like any of the top 3 guys very, very well. My top 3 guys very, very well. And what leads me to say like this is a flavor of the month, depending on GMs, is you have a guy like Daniel Jeremiah who says Marshawn Lloyd out of USC's his number 1 running back. I think Marshawn's a little slow for my liking. I don't necessarily like his game speed. I don't think he bursts that well. I don't think he gets away from defenders that well. But I look at it and I think in the 2nd or 3rd round, we could see a run on these running backs go.
100%. I think on day 2 of the draft, you'll see a run of all these guys going. You might see between the 2nd and 3rd round, you might see 8 running backs gone. And it'll seem like every 3rd or 4th pick, it'll be a running back. I think their value, you could get them in the 2nd or 3rd round, and I think a couple of them will slip and be like the first few picks on day 3 being picked out of the 4th round. I think a lot of these guys don't make it past the 4th round. So, yeah, I do agree on day 2 will be when the run at all these guys after everybody addressed their main needs. I think you'll see a lot of these guys be gone.
All right, before we head out and we call it a night on the draft podcast, Mo. We're coming up. It is as of the day recording. It is the 28th, so we would be a month from like day 3 or day 3 of the NFL draft. Mo, before we go, what are some storylines or what are some of the most interesting points you're looking forward to or looking at heading into April and heading into the NFL draft in about a month?
Man, I'm looking at the draft after the top 5. Whenever the last quarterback is taken, whether it's like, so if Patriots take quarterback and then the next one isn't a quarterback, I'm looking for once we move off the quarterbacks where certain players go. I want to see if Marvin Harrison Jr. really going to slip through the cracks and maybe the Bears will be able to double back and get him at 9 and end up getting Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of people think that's a high possibility because of this run at quarterbacks. So I want to see if some of these, these skill guys in these skill positions are going to fall a little bit at the run of quarterbacks, and I want to see how much it's going to benefit him. How much is it going to benefit Malik Neighbors if he goes to a quarterback, if he's already able to line up to a quarterback that can win football games? How much is it going to impact Marvin Harrison Jr. if he slips to 9 and gets to grow alongside Caleb Williams and basically have the same trajectory of a career and can play with each other for their entire career? Like, how much is some of that stuff, if it does happen, impact some of these guys at the skill positions career? So that's what I can't wait to see, is like, we're so focused on quarterbacks, and there was a dry quarterback draft last year. So we're so focused on quarterbacks, and there are some really talented guys, but like a lot of these skill position guys that are elite talents are slipping through the cracks. And so I can't wait till all their names start getting called on draft nights, because I can't wait to evaluate how successful I think these guys are going to be based on where they're drafted.
Yeah, for me, I think an interesting storyline that no one's talking about, in my opinion, is kind of where Brock Bowers goes. We all think Brock's going to be the next Travis Kelce, and we all think he's that guy. But the last time we said that was Kyle Pitts, and Pitts has kind of had an up and down career. Does Kyle Pitts' success or lack of success or his career affect where Brock Bowers goes, a guy who we think could be the next Travis Kelce? That's what I want to see, because everybody locks him in as a top 10 pick. I'm not so sure he makes it in the top 10. I'm not saying he isn't worthy of the top 10. I think he's going to be when I do my top 50 big board, when it's all said and done, I think he's probably going to wind up being a top 7 or 8 player in this draft. But the question becomes, does he wind up being a top 10 pick when the dust has settled and the smoke's cleared? I don't know, because I don't know how many people are going to look at the Kyle Pitts draft and say, the last time we hyped up our tight end this much, it didn't work out.
I don't think anybody cares what Kyle Pitts turned out to be. I think everybody, if you're a coach and you're like, man, if you're the Jets offensive coordinator and you're like, man, I got everything. If I can get me an elite tight end, like, I don't care that Kyle Pitts didn't pan out. We're not even 100% sure it was on Kyle Pitts. We think it was the negligence of Arthur Smith and trying to implement him in the offense. So I don't think, because the hype around Kyle Pitts, when we saw why his career's been up and down up to this point, and we think like it might be on a higher trajectory with a real quarterback that can play the quarterback position and win you 10, 11 games a year in Kirk Cousins. So like, I think if you're looking at Brock Bowers, I don't even think you should be thinking about Kyle Pitts at all. You should just be thinking about how he fits your system. And for some reason, man, he probably ends up on the Jets, man. It seemed like they're trying to load up on weapons. Just add him to the Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall in the backfield with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I could see him being ready-made and being that Travis Kelce type player year one if he ended up going to the Jets. So if he's still sitting there and the Jets are taking a first-round pick, don't be surprised if that's where he goes.
I agree. I think he is a Travis Kelce type of guy. So, to me, I would take, if I was the Chargers, I'd take him. I wouldn't let him get to the Jets. I think they pick before the Jets, but they'll probably go Malik Neighbors or a wide receiver there. Should they? I guess, but I mean, you can get some good wide receivers in the later in the draft. You can get a guy who's a once in a generation talent at tight end. So, those types of things. Mo, before we go, I know that we are doing the Draft Capital podcast together, but let everyone know where they can find kind of your other shows and what you're working on and those types of things.
Yeah, I'm going to be posting clips just of my thoughts daily on, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Reels, YouTube, all that, just to get my thoughts out. So in case I can't ever get a full episode out, but I'm going to have an episode of Up in Flames drop this weekend as well. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But I appreciate you for, us linking back to get Draft Capital back going. We're going to have a couple shows a week, even if I got to record solo and you got to record solo, but we got about a month into the draft, so we got to get all our thoughts out so nobody can be like, oh, of course you said that. Nah, we're going to get all this recorded and get all this out so we got our proof, months and years down the line that we said what we said.
Yeah, for sure. And on top of that, we're going to try to get some different, guests on the show, like Chris LeBron, see what he wants to do with the Giants. We're going to try to get Cruz on here to talk about Washington. We're going to get a bunch of different guys on here to kind of talk about their drafts. We're going to try to do some mock drafts, relate to some mock drafts, or react to some mock drafts, those types of things from this point out. So, and for me, you could always find me at or on Twitter at at StewPock5 or you can check out the Morning Brew with Stew on at Stew Morning. If you're a football fan or you want to educate yourself a little bit more on the game, go back and listen to the last few episodes I've done. I've been bringing in some coaches to talk about, and not just random coaches, like some guys who have done some things at some high levels in the sport of football to talk about kind of offensive football and those types of things. So if you want to learn a little bit more, go check out those episodes. But Mo, a big thank you. Big thank you to everybody listening. Also, don't forget to go check out the Off the Ball Network YouTube page, the Twitter, or Facebook, social media. We got a lot of good stuff going on there. We just added, the Air Raid podcast to our repertoire. We got so many talented guys like Mo and what he does with the college football. We got Kim with what he does with the betting and that type of stuff. We got Kev and Prez with what they do with basketball. So we got everything for everybody. So go check it out and check out Off the Ball Network and make sure you like, subscribe, all that stuff, and be back next week for another episode of the Draft Capital Podcast.